We're continuing on with Jesus Said. This week, we are saying, Jesus said, I am not a stoner. So, no, Jesus said, I'm not a stoner. However, I am. Now, I know I don't look super, this is as stoner as I could get, okay? I know it's not super radical, but I do have Bon Jovi on. Does that make it? Is like just to make sure you can see. So, not super radical, I know, but for me, I'm really on it today. So, I'm not a stoner. So today, I hope everyone here, I know many of you, most of you, do you trust me? Do you think that we'll get to a point? Yes, okay, hopefully, okay. If at the beginning, as we start, you don't think you're seeing any point, and you even think she's off the rails, just hold on. I think we'll get there, okay? I think we'll get somewhere today. So Luke is going to be helping me today put this message together. So what I want to tell you first is a story. So like I said, I am a stoner. So what does that mean? So around, I would probably say, I was about 8 years old. I was in a local school, public school, just like you have here. In America, we have public schools, and then we have Christian schools, or private schools. I was going to a public school, and we were looking for a private school for me to go to, a Christian school. And we found one, and we went to check it out. And now looking back, I can't believe I would have liked it. But at the time, I remember thinking this would be so amazing. They had these little cubbies. Now, who wants to sit in a cubby? I mean, literally, you're alienated from all the other kids. But it was little cubbies. And this shows you how American it was. There was a little American flag and a little Christian flag. Some of you don't even know there's a Christian flag. Did you? There is. And they were right up in front. And that's how you picked one up and waved when you needed a teacher to come and help you. Anyway, I so wanted to go to this school. It was brand new. I think at the time I had some friends that were going, so I was super excited. We applied, and I remember very, very clearly the day my mom came in. I think I was even in her bedroom. She walked in with a letter. And she walked in with this letter that she said, I don't believe she read it to me, but she basically said, you didn't get into the school. Keep in mind, my mom's holding the paper, cigarette in hand. Why didn't we get into the school? We didn't get in the school because my mom smoked, we wore trousers, and we listened to secular music. Guess what? I still do. So at that time, I didn't realize in my 8-year-old mind that I was starting to become a stoner. Now, you're going to hear a story in just a few minutes, and I'm going to tell you more, so if you don't understand what that means, don't worry, because all of us don't yet. But what happened is I began to find all these things. There became a list that I began to develop. Okay, as Christians, okay, we don't smoke. Okay, as Christians, we don't wear trousers. As Christians, we don't listen to secular music. And then, slowly, what began to happen, as people that did those things, I began to think, oh, they're not good enough. They're not good enough. They're not good enough. Why? Because I apparently wasn't good enough. So if I wasn't good enough, then they couldn't be good enough. But just to break that cycle a little bit, now I'm not saying there's plenty of music out there that I would not recommend you listening to. It doesn't have appropriate message. I would not let my kids listen to it. If they listen to it, they're sneaking off and listening to it. But there's some music that's just fun. This song, however, is just kind of fun, and you're gonna help me, because we're gonna break that, because after all these years, from 8 years to 45, we're gonna redeem that moment for me, okay? All right? You know what's coming, right? This in that school. I'm still singing that song. It's fine. All right. Thanks, guys. All right. I feel better. Do you feel better? All right. Go out. Tell people that Life Church Bristol is playing Bon Jovi. The seats will be empty. No, actually, they'll be full. All right. So I'm going to read you a story, and then I'm going to tell it to you again. So you're going to hear it twice, all right? So this is in John 8, 1 through 11. Jesus walked up the Mount of Olives, near the city where he spent the night. Then at dawn, Jesus appeared at the temple courts again, and soon all the people gathered around to listen to his words. So he sat down and taught them. Then in the middle of his teaching, the religious scholars and the Pharisees broke through the crowd and brought a woman who had been caught in the act of committing adultery, and made her stand in the middle of everyone. Then they said to Jesus, "Teacher, we caught this woman in the very act of adultery. Doesn't Moses' law command us to stone to death a woman like this? Tell us, what do you say we should do with her?" They were only testing Jesus, you see, because they had hoped to trap him with his own words and accuse him of breaking the laws of Moses. But Jesus didn't answer them. Instead, he simply bent down and wrote in the dust with his finger. Angry, they kept insisting that he answer their questions. So Jesus stood up and looked at them and said, "Let's have the man who has never had a sinful desire throw the first stone at her." And then he bent over and again wrote some more words in the dust. Upon hearing that, her accusers slowly left the crowd one at a time, beginning with the oldest to the youngest, with a convicted conscience, until finally Jesus was left alone with the woman, still standing there in front of him. So he stood back up and said to her, "Dear woman, where are your accusers? Is there no one here to condemn you?" Looking around, she replied, "I see no one." Jesus said, "Then certainly I don't condemn you either. Go, and from now on, be free from a life of sin." All right, so we have some characters in this play. So I want you to think of this as a play, okay? You're going to have to come with me a little bit. It's early, I know, but let's think of this as a play. So you've got characters. In this play, who do you have? You've got Jesus. You have the woman, obviously, who's been caught in adultery. You have the crowd. Then you have the Pharisees. That's just another word really for the religious leaders of the day. And then you have someone who's missing. We're going to call him the missing man. Because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure for someone to be caught in adultery, there has to be someone else there. So he wasn't there. He is the missing man. So, then the setting for the play. Okay, so just a couple of days earlier, these same religious leaders had been talking together and they were trying to figure out what in the heck to do with Jesus. They didn't like him, they didn't like what he was saying, but the people loved him. So they knew if they had him arrested, it was not going to go down well. So they were conspiring, what are we going to do? So then they had this brilliant idea. So notice they actually caught the woman. They had to be looking out for someone who was in breaking the law of Moses. They were looking for someone in sin, and they thought, "I've got him. I'm going to grab this situation, and we're going to trick Jesus." So then another little bit, so a little background. So I want you to think about this as we continue to tell the story, because I think this is really important. So they were the Jews, which were the people of Jesus, the people of God, they had different festivals throughout the year, different feasts. Just like we do, we just call them bank holidays here because we've gotten a little bored with names, but they had really cool names. And so they had one called the Feast of Tabernacles. So what they did is they put up these little huts. That's the only way I know how to describe them. They still do that, makeshift little huts, and they would stay in them for 7 days. Some people would actually stay the entire time. Some people would go in for their meals or whatever. But what it was to remember the times when they had been in captivity. They had been slaves for many years, and so this was a celebration and a remembrance of God's grace, his mercy, and his provision. So this event takes place right off the back of the religious leaders and this entire crowd celebrating God's grace. So keep that in mind as you're hearing the story. All right, so scene 1. Jesus walks in. It says it's very early in the dawn. Hang on, my technical team is struggling. There we go. Early in the morning. It was very early in the morning, he comes to the temple. So a temple is just another word for church. I'm sure Jesus came early. He was probably helping whoever was our Anna in the day, set up the teas, coffees. I'm sure he was a servant, so he was probably helping get pancakes ready for the little later session they were having. So this is Jesus coming bright and early, helping at the temple. And then, but shortly after, he was going to be teaching. So the crowds began to come. And they just would be in masses. At this time, so many people were trying to figure out who this Jesus was and what was going on. So they came in, and you know what Jesus did is they began to fill the room. He did something I think is very, very cool. He just sits down in the middle of them, and he begins to share. Because at that time, that was a very traditional thing to do. But it was not, hey, I'm up here preaching to you. It's, hey, let's figure this out. Let me share what I know. And not a condemnation, oh, you're so stupid you don't know it. No, it's like, come on, let's talk. Let's have a chat. Let's figure this out together. So next, so this is scene 1. In the very middle of Jesus' teaching, now, Jesus would have still been sitting down at this time. In the very middle of his teaching, those religious leaders decide to show up. Enter stage left. Of course, you have to have ominous music, right? So the religious leaders are coming in. And so they have the woman that has been caught in the very act of adultery. Now, think about that. She was caught in that moment. She didn't have time. They wouldn't have let her freshen up, put on better clothes. However she looked, she looked. So they brought her in at that very moment and put her, it says, in the absolute middle of the crowd. Just think about that for a moment. The crowd has filled the place. Jesus is sitting there. You're in the middle of absolute shame. You have literally been ripped out of the middle of having a relationship with another person and put in the middle of this crowd. So then the religious leaders, interrupting Jesus, they say, doesn't the law of Moses command that we stone a woman just like this? Now that's how I know she still looks like she's been caught in adultery, because they don't even say at that moment. I say, doesn't a woman like this deserve to be punished? Tell us what you think. They said, teacher. So even mocking him a bit, teacher, what do you think? So, but Jesus did something very interesting when they came in. I think you could hear the crickets chirping as he knelt down. They came in, accused her of something horrible. But Jesus said nothing. Now, we don't know exactly what Jesus wrote, so I'm going to take creative liberty today. There are different theories. Some theories is it was in that day and age, it was part of a way that people could disregard someone that was speaking, was to simply kneel down and begin to write in the sand or write on the floor. And so maybe that's what Jesus was doing. There's some theories from different scriptures in the Bible that it could be that he was actually writing their sins, that they came in accusing, and so he was like, let me just put a little reminder here on the ground. It could be, and this is the theory I'm thinking, and I could be wrong, but since the Bible doesn't tell us, we're going to guess, that maybe he was writing to her. Maybe he was writing her a message. She's in the most embarrassing place she's probably ever been in her life, and I think maybe at that moment, Jesus was giving her just a second of something to focus on other than the crowd around her. So they insisted. So as he's knelt down, they insisted that he answer them. And then Jesus does something really cool. He begins to stand. This is the cool part. I can just see it. Jesus calmly stands up. And I think he lets a moment or two go by as he stands there, and he says, any of you that are without sin, go ahead, pick up the stone. And then you know what he does? He leaves it there and goes right back down. I'm guessing there was again silence. So it gets even better. We're still in scene 1. So the religious leaders, crickets chirping, everybody's quiet. They begin to do something now. They stood there for a few moments, and literally one by one, from oldest to youngest, they begin to exit stage right. Just listen, it's good. Beatles didn't even know they were writing about this. He didn't know she was pairing up with Jesus. All right, so then religious leaders are gone. Scene 2. We still have Jesus. We still have the woman. The missing man still somewhere. What we hear next is Jesus looks at the woman and he asks her, he said, "Dear woman, where are your accusers?" Now, tell me if I'm wrong. The Bible doesn't say clearly that the crowd was still there, but would you have left? No. We rubberneck any accident, anything's happened. The crowd was silent. The big players were the religious leaders, but they were not budging, I guarantee it. This scenario was going on. They might have backed up, but they were like, "Oh, Jesus just said that." They would have been listening. So, but Jesus says, "Where are your accusers?" And then she does something. She looks around. I think the crowd's still there. The religious leaders are gone. The ones accusing her are gone. But she's looking around in her shame, and she's standing there, and he says, "Where are your accusers?" And she says, "I see no one. I see no one." I think this is really powerful. Because I think in this moment, you know what she saw? She saw Jesus. She saw him. The crowd was still there that were watching all this scandal go on. But she simply saw him at this moment. So then Jesus says, there's no one here condemning you, then certainly I don't condemn you either. And then he says, "Go, and from now on be free. Free from a life of sin." So that's our story. That's our play. We're going to take about four observations from this story, okay? So, first one is this. Right is wrong without grace. So in this story, the accusers, I know I even called them losers, or I didn't. So I had help with that. So Beatles called them losers. That wasn't my fault. But in the story, they were actually right. They were partially right, let's say. So this woman, in that it was a sin, it was against the law to commit adultery. So, but there were a couple things wrong with it. First, the law actually said it's wrong for the man and the woman, but guess who they brought? The woman. Where was the man? Did they really care about the law? If they really cared about following the law, both of them would have been there. They didn't care about following the law. They cared about catching Jesus out. That's their only goal. They didn't care about the law being followed. So, but in general, these guys were correct. She was wrong. She was completely in the wrong. And like I said, the man wasn't even there. So, but right is still wrong without grace. And that's what Jesus did. That's what he changed. So there was a law, but when Jesus came, he made all of that right that needed to be there wrong unless it came with grace. So those young years where I began to learn, oh, you do this. Oh, you like Bon Jovi. You like, no, I'm not qualifying or saying that I'm not trying to say that there is not sin. So please hear me. What I'm saying is that it's that condemnation. In this story, she came to him still in the midst of her sin, still in the midst of it, and Jesus embraced her. And he said, "I don't condemn you." So the second thing that we hear from this story is that Jesus offers grace and a higher standard. So notice in this story, when he's left with her, standing in front of him, and he asks where her accusers are, he doesn't ask, is she guilty? He doesn't say, oh, you want to give me your side of the story? Tell me what's going on. First of all, like I said, I think it was probably fairly obvious. I mean, I don't know what she was wearing. I don't know if she had Victoria's Secret on or Ann Summers or whatever she might have had on when she was caught. I'm pretty sure the story was told just by visually seeing her. So I don't know which. But then I also think God saw into her heart. And I think he knew exactly who she was. And he loved her yet. He loved her yet, seeing right into her. And I think that's what she felt. So I'd say to you today, if you look around and you see your accusers, they're really not there. In the story, yes, physically they were there. Yours may physically be there. But as this woman turned her eyes to the one that mattered, the accusers had to leave, didn't they? The crowd was silent. I want you to hear those crickets chirping in your ear when Satan or your boss or your ex, whoever, begins to condemn you. Let cricket sounds just come into your ears and say, nope. Jesus went silent, and then he began to write in the sand. He didn't condemn me, nor should you be condemned. So he does offer her grace. But notice that he also says, go and sin no more. And I think this is important. So this is something where I got wrong. So what I began to learn is that I look at the sin, I look at the problems first, and condemnation comes both to myself and other people. But get this. Love brings change. Change does not bring love. Jesus loved that woman, and I dare say she walked out of that place a changed lady. She was in the midst of her sin. She was in the midst of all kinds of problems, but she changed because of love. We do not change. We do not become different in hopes of love. Does that make sense? And that's where we get it wrong. And church, if we try to change people before we love them, we're going to get it wrong every single time. We have to love people and then let God bring a change. And it didn't completely work with me because I still got Bon Jovi on. There are a few of his songs I don't listen to. You would be glad to know. Living on Prayer is still top of the list. So Jesus offers grace and a higher standard. Next thing we can observe is that your accusers have left the building. Now, just for a second, I know it's early, but I just want a little cheer. If I have to play Bon Jovi again to get it, we will. But I just want you in your mind's eye to look around in your mind's eye and think about the accusations that have been against you in your life. And I want you to hear your accusers have left the building. There's no one here to accuse you. So can you just clap? That's it. They're gone. They've absolutely left the building. So don't acknowledge them anymore. They're gone. You can download that song on Spotify. It's easy to do. All right? And last thing that we're going to observe. It takes one to know one. Now, a little background for those of you that are not Harry Potter fans. Okay, so I told you guys to stick with me today. This is a little off. Okay, so Luna Lovegood is going to help us just understand a little bit about thestrals. Okay, so takes one to know one. I'm going to play this video and then I'm going to explain why this is relevant to any of us. Okay, go ahead, Luke.
Potter.
Your feet. Aren't they cold?
Bit. Unfortunately, all my shoes have mysteriously disappeared. I suspect nargles are behind it.
What are they?
They're called thestrals. They're quite gentle, really, but people avoid them because they're a bit...
different. But why can't the others see them?
They can only be seen by people who've seen death.
So, you've known someone who's died, then?
My mum. She was quite an extraordinary witch, but she did like to experiment, and one day one of her spells went badly wrong. I was 9.
I'm sorry.
Yes, it was rather horrible. I do feel very sad about it sometimes. But I've got Dad. We both believe you, by the way. That he who must not be named is back, and you fought him, and the ministry and the prophet are conspiring.
All right. All right. So in this little clip, Luna is introducing Harry Potter to Thestrals. So Thestrals, he could see them. But if you've seen the film, you know everyone couldn't see them. So just as Luna said, you can only see them if you have known someone close to you, if you've experienced death in some form. So therefore, they could then see them. Now, what does this in the world have to do with this story? Well, in Jesus's heritage, in his bloodline, in his family history, he has a lot of women that had pretty scandalous backgrounds. And so when this woman came to him, I have a thought that he might have been seeing his heritage, that he was seeing past her because he saw the Thestrals. Now, he hadn't committed those sins. The Bible says that he was without sin. But in his lineage, in his family history, oh, there was plenty of it. And I think this is great, 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 great grandma, whatever. And so there was a lady, Tamar. She became a temple prostitute. There was a lady, Rahab. She was a spy. She helped the Israelite spies, yet she also was a prostitute. There was a lady named Bathsheba. She had an affair with the king of England, not with the king of England, with the king of Israel. And she had an affair with him, so much so then the king ended up killing her husband in battle. So he knew, he saw deeper into her soul. And so it takes one to know one. So although Jesus was without sin, his family lineage gave him a great connection to the brokenness of this woman. And just like Luna and just like Harry Potter both had experienced death and had seen death, that gave him an insight that other people didn't have. So I'm going to conclude with these couple of thoughts. One, are you a stoner? Now, if you've not been in church very long, or if you're not a believer, you're probably like, I don't think so. But those of you that might have grown up a bit like me, you might have learned to change first and love second. And I want to challenge you today to love first and change second. And when you look at other people, do the same thing, expect the same thing, embrace them as they are, embrace them where they are, and let them come to Jesus and let him sort them out. All right? Because I can tell you, when other people, my husband included, try to sort me out, it never goes well. It doesn't go well. But when Jesus comes in and he begins to change things in me, it's amazing what begins to happen. Then next, have you been stoned? Have you been living in your shame? Have you been living based on what other people have said about you? What you think they've thought about you? Have you been living with your own demons? So many of you know I teach fitness classes and do personal training. So if you come to me and you're a mess, let's say you're severely overweight, you've got high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all your bones creak, you can't sit down well, you can't stand up well, you eat McDonald's 3 times a day, 7 days a week. I'm not talking just about David and Chloe on that one. But they confessed that they went to McDonald's today. So if you come to me, I would be an absolutely lousy trainer if I gave you the meals that you're supposed to eat 7 days a week. If I told you all the exercises that you need to do. You need to exercise 7 days a week. I changed everything about you on that day. What would happen? That would be the last session that I had with you. But you know what I usually do? I say, pick a habit. What's one of the, if it's McDonald's 7 days a week, 3 times a day, I'm like, can we take it down to 2 times a day, 7 times a week? Make a change. Make a change. And as you begin to feel the health benefits, guess what? You're going to start to be my friends, because you're going to be, all of a sudden, without all that McDonald's in me, all of a sudden I'm starting to feel better. That's how we walk with Jesus. That's how we find how we change. That's how we get the junk out of our life that's supposed to be out of there, is that I make a move towards him because I have this relationship with him, and then I make another move. And then that feels better, and then I make another move, and then that feels better. And I think Jesus might have written some things like this for her. As she's standing there, the worst day of her life, absolutely shamed in her Victoria's Secret and some whatever she's wearing, obvious that she has been in the middle of adultery, ripped out of that home, wherever she was. I think he might have said, you are loved. You were forgiven, chosen, understood, accepted, free, whatever those words are for you. I believe that's what he was speaking to her that day. And I think he was just giving her that courage. It's going to be over in a minute, and it's all going to be different. So look to him this morning. If this is you, if you've been stoned, trust him. He is saying this to you. And those accusers, look around. They're gone. They're not here. Right? We are going to pray. If you guys would just stand with me. You've been sitting for a while. It's almost pancake time. But I just want to pray, and I want to pray for 2 groups of people, the stoners and the stoned. Okay? I don't know which category you fall in. My guess, both. Because I know, because I felt stoned, guess what? I quickly begin to pick up the stones. So whatever category you are in, both or either, I just want to just ask God to help us. Ask him to be with us this morning, and ask him for freedom. Dear God, I just thank you. I thank you for this story. I thank you for the truth in this story. I thank you for the power in this story, God. Lord, I ask that those of us that you have set free, God, that you have changed our lives, God, that you will help us to embrace those who have not had their lives changed by you, not with judgment, not with critique, God, but with a genuine embrace. Over and over in the last few weeks, you have shown us that you embrace those that were still in the absolute midst of their problems and their sin, whatever it was. You willingly hugged them. You willingly embraced them. You did not ask them to change first. You simply said, come. You simply said, you're forgiven. And God, in that love, you change. And God, I pray that that's what we will walk out of this place today, that we will realize that you have chosen us. You have understood us. You have accepted us. And Lord, in that we no longer want to stone others, but we want to embrace them as you did. And I thank you and I praise you. In your mighty name we pray. Amen.